Is Donald Trump too scared to name George Bush and P2 FREEMASONs as Kennedy assassins? U.S. Corporation President Donald Trump last week announced he would release all records relating to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, other than the names and addresses of any mentioned person who is still living. In other words, it appears he's too scared to mention the involvement of George in the Vatican P2 Freemason Lodge Fax's New World Order faction. Pentagon officials, however, say Trump must scold the CIA, Mossad, the FBI, and the Bush cabal to release all JFK files since Ben-Gurion wanted JFK dead, and the same perps also did in 11 September. These are the people who aim to create a world fascist government controlled by members of European royal families who claim descent from the Caesars and from King David, as revealed by forensic research over a period of many years. This research, including meetings with many members of this family group, has led us to the conclusion that these are all real elders of Zion. Thanks to the confessions of Benjamin Franklin and others, John F. Kennedy became aware of the plot to start World War III, wipe out 90% of humanity, and turn the rest into slaves. The Zionists very nearly succeeded in accomplishing this by triggering all-out nuclear war during Cuban Missile Crisis. That is why Kennedy decided to take away their main source of power, their ability to create money out of thin air. George Bush and the Zionists had Kennedy assassinated in order to prevent the nationalization of the Federal Reserve Board. These people are still in control of the creation of US dollars, euros, and Japanese yen out of thin air. Their main instrument of power in the US these days is still Bush, Clinton, Rockefeller, Zionist Federal Reserve Board. Truth researchers agree. A very interesting example of how these gangsters distribute their fiat money can be seen in the article at the link below that shows how the rise in Amazon prices matches the rise in central bank money printing and moves in the opposite direction of actual Amazon results. There can be little doubt that Jeff Bezos is now the world's richest man because he has been selected as the premier distributor of fiat money. Forensic research has shown that most major list corporations are controlled via hedge funds like Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street, Fidelity, and etc. by this family group, known now to many as the Khazarian Mafia. In Japan, this writer has identified the quizzling used by Khazarian Mafia, thanks to testimony by assassins formerly in their employ here. These people are now vanishing one by one as their former hitmen turn on them, the assassins say. The quizzling politician Sergei Mehara played a key role in the recent theft of a Japanese election by Khazarian mobsters led by Rothschild agent Michael Greenberg and Barbara Bush's cousin Richard Armitage. Mehara is the son of the North Korean agent Son Tae-chuk, also known as Daisaku Ikeda. Ikeda for years was the absolute ruler of the Soka Gakkai Buddhist lay group and controller of Kumeko political party, whose duplicate members are crucial to maintaining Khazarian control of Japan. Ikeda has been in vegetative state for several years, so Mehara is effectively in charge now, even though he ostensibly belongs to a different political grouping. White Dragon Society sources in Japan say Mehara regularly walks into U.S. Embassy in Tokyo and never asks to show any ID. The Khazarians stole the Japanese election because the Party of Hope led the Koke Yukiko was planning to nationalize the Bank of Japan, say sources close to Japanese Emperor. The U.S. President Donald Trump scheduled to visit Japan from November the 5th to 7th. The Center for Strategic International Study had big meetings this past weekend to Tokyo to discuss what agenda they were going to present to Trump. Prior to this gathering, the CSIS sent a top agent to meet with a representative of the White Dragon Society. At this meeting, the CSIS official, who personally does not approve of Armitage, said that he was sent by Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte to investigate the mysterious Dr. Michael Van der Meer, aka Dr. Michael Meering, who had both his legs blown off by a bomb in Davao, Philippines, when Duterte was mayor there. The official was told Van der Meer believed the bomb was set by Duterte, whom he believed was working for George Bush Sr. The CISI official replied by saying Duterte denied any involvement in setting off the bomb. Asked what Vladimir was doing in Philippines, it was explained that he was looking for gold. Vladimir was representing what he called the family and needed gold in order to stave off the bankruptcy. The family he was referring to was none other than the people claiming descent from King David, the Khazarian mob. What this shows is that the Khazarian mob-controlled G7 nations account for 64% of world's debt. Japan and the United States cooperation alone own 51% of the world's debt. The mostly Asian creditors to the Khazarian nations are demanding payment in gold, something the Khazarians have run out of. The Khazarians bought time in 2001 by blowing up the World Trade Center and invading Iraq in order to steal oil to use to pay off their debts. This time, the historical Khazarian Zionists are trying desperately to get out of their payment obligations by staging an Armageddon event using North Korean, which is why stealing the Japanese election was so important to them. That is why it is crucial that Donald Trump not be duped by a fake Khazarian North Korean threat story when he comes to Asia next week. Donald Trump has already been fooled by the story of North Korean kidnapped victims. For example, the Khazarian mob is putting out a story that a 30-year-old Megumi Yokota was kidnapped by North Korea, and they regularly trot out her parents on TV to shed tears about their missing daughter. In fact, Megumi became the mother of North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, and her parents have regular secret meetings with her and their grandson Kim Jong-un in Moscow, in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, according to Japanese military intelligence, members of the Rothschild family, and others. The Japanese puppet regime, as soon as they stole the election, obediently began screaming about North Korean threat, as ordered by the Khazarian slave masters. The Yamaguchi-gumi assassin Mr. K told this writer last week that his prediction of a natural disaster in Japan around election time were based on Khazarian threats to unleash earthquake weapons in order to ensure Japanese obedience to their rule. It was pointed out by Mr. K that earthquake weapons are not a one-way street and that a sudden swarm of earthquakes at La Palma, one of the Canary Islands in the Atlantic, threatened a 100 meters tsunami against the U.S. East Coast in southern Europe last week. That was the real reason why the Khazarians backed off on using their earthquake weapon, he was told. As long as the situation in North Korea is kept under control, this time the world has a very real chance of bankrupting these Khazarian criminals once and for all. In a hint that may happen, a White Dragon Society source in Canada notes that in the next 8 days, Canada, Europe, Japan, America, and the UK will all host central bank meetings. Something is up for sure. The something could be an end for fiat banking, which is inevitable. As to exactly what that happens, though, we shall see. In any case, Khazarian mob control of the Middle East and thirst of petrodollar is crumbling. In Iraq, Mossad Assad Masoud Barzani was removed from power as the Kurdish people turned against him for serving Israel, Pentagon sources note. Russia has now taken control of the Kurdish pipeline to the Mediterranean and cut off oil to Israel, the sources add. Khazarian slave state Saudi Arabia is now trying desperately to show a moderate face and seek investors as its oil money power continues to wane. But until Saudis learn to actually work and not rely on foreign servants, they are not going to find much interest in their plans. In the US too, the push of Khazarians continues to unfold. This was seen last week as Donald Trump and Stephen Bannon tightened their grip on the Republican Party with the exodus of anti-Trumper Senators Bob Corker, Jeff Flake, and Luther Strange, who were backed by U.S. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and the GOP establishment. Also, the push of Khazarian corporate media continued last week with the fire of Mark Harperin from the NBC's Washington bureau on charges of sexual harassment. There will be a lot more of that going on as Hollywood and the corporate media conglomerates are taking down of Khazarian control, promised Pentagon and Asian officials. Pentagon sources also had the following comment to make on the new government in China. Wang Qishan made lots of enemies and may have stepped down from the Politburo Standing Committee to new guy Xia Leiji can crack down on corruption. but he still sees financial guy in the back channel for Trump because he owns so many USA properties. The new Chinese Politburo Standing Committee has 2 representatives from the Shanghai faction of Jiang Zemin, 2 from the Guangdong faction of Hu Jintao, and 3 from Northern faction of Xi Jinping. This means at least 2 of the main power centers must sign off on any major decisions, and no single faction can exercise dictatorial control. This Chinese group will be discussing how to improve world governance, with Russian Orthodox Christian power symbolized by President Putin and the U.S. nationalist autocracy symbolized by Trump. If the world's lucky, many big and good decisions will be made when Trump visits Asia from November the 3rd to 14, 2017.